So, if you've ever tried to get your finances in order, you'll already know the drill. The sheer volume of advice out there, it's completely overwhelming. We're constantly bombarded with perfect mathematical formulas, massive spreadsheets, and these hyper-clinical strategies telling us to optimize every single penny. But what if the secret to getting out of debt isn't about perfectly optimizing your math? What if it's actually about optimizing your mind? Today, in this explainer, our mission is to cut straight through the noise. We're going to focus on psychological effectiveness over mathematical perfection and see how behavioral psychology is quite literally the most powerful tool you have for reclaiming your financial freedom.
But listen, before we can even begin to fix the numbers, we have to acknowledge a very real, very visceral reality. Debt takes a heavy, exhausting emotional toll on everyday people. Just hear what one user on the Reddit community r/debtfree shared. They said, "This is a marathon, not a sprint, but damn does it hurt. I'm depressed, discouraged, and can barely do the minimum. I'm existing to work and not living." Wow, that is incredibly powerful. And sadly, it's a feeling millions of people wake up with every single day.
And this isn't just in your head. It's not just a feeling. According to data from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS, debt actually physically impacts your health. We're talking about chronic headaches, a total lack of quality sleep, an inability to focus at your job, and highly elevated levels of anxiety and depression. So lowering your defenses and validating your struggle, that is absolutely step one. You aren't failing because you can't do math. You are carrying a massive cognitive and physical burden. Because you're under this immense pressure. We need to completely redefine a concept we all love to hate. Yep, the budget. Based on some great advice from Marine Credit Union, we need to completely reframe what this word actually means. A budget is not a punishment. Let me say that again. It's a sustainable, flexible plan that supports your real life rather than some rigid tool for radical financial restriction. If you cut out everything you enjoy, you're going to feel deprived, and trust me, the budget will fail. So how do we fix a broken budget and bring it back to reality? Marine Credit Union outlines 4 really practical steps to build a system that won't fall apart the minute life happens. First step, if your income fluctuates, base your plan on your lowest expected income. That ensures your essentials are always covered. Second, stop guessing. Track your actual spending history for 30 to 60 days. Third, you've got to account for those small, everyday miscellaneous purchases. Those coffees and random subscriptions, they add up and destroy rigid budgets. And fourth, define a clear, meaningful goal to stay motivated, because a budget without a real purpose is just a chore. All right, moving right along into the great debate, the avalanche versus the snowball method. Let's ground this with some hypothetical loan data from Fidelity. Imagine you're juggling 3 debts. Loan 1 is a $20,000 balance with a punishing 20% interest rate. Loan 2 is a massive $100,000 balance at 6%. And loan 3 is a $10,000 balance at just 3%. Now, a purely mathematical approach, what we call the avalanche method, would tell you to attack that 20% loan first because it saves you the absolute most money in interest over time. It makes perfect logical sense. But as we're discovering in this explainer, human beings are rarely purely mathematical. So here's the showdown. The debt avalanche focuses on saving maximum interest by attacking the highest rate first. It is mathematically superior, no doubt about it. But the debt snowball, it flips the script entirely. It tells you to ignore the interest rates completely and attack the smallest balance first, which in our last example would be that $10,000 loan. Why in the world would you do that? Because it is psychologically superior. It gives you instant gratification and builds immediate emotional momentum. So you got to be asking yourself, why would anyone choose a repayment method that essentially guarantees you're going to pay more in interest to the bank? Why do financial experts ever recommend the mathematically worse option? The answer actually lies deep down in behavioral psychology and understanding how we humans truly operate under stress. Think about it. Doing interest rate math on a spreadsheet doesn't magically stop you from swiping your credit card for an impulse buy when you've just had a terrible day, right? Listen to this insight from Scott Bollinger, a guy who successfully paid off $40,000 of personal debt using the snowball method. He writes, "The truth is that most of our decisions, especially when it comes to spending money, are made emotionally. Emotional motivation and persistence, that is what actually gets the job done." According to financial planning researcher Michael Kitzes, the behavioral ingenuity of the snowball method is pretty profound. By tackling the smallest debt first, you rack up small victories. And these highly achievable wins, they actually transform your financial self-image. You go from feeling like someone who is just drowning in debt to seeing yourself as a successful debt payer. It totally prevents that paralyzing feeling of being overwhelmed by a giant mountain of high-interest debt. Plus, it sparks a level of excitement that frequently causes people to naturally accelerate their repayment. And his whole behavioral framing explains another wildly controversial tactic in personal finance: the number 12%. This is the famously high stock market return assumption that financial personality Dave Ramsey often uses when telling people how much their investments could grow. Now, financial advisors constantly criticize this as being unrealistically high, but Michael Kitces points out the absolute behavioral genius here. It's not about accurate economic forecasting at all. It's about creating enough fear of missing out, good old FOMO, to shock someone into changing their habits today. When you see how massive your wealth could be at 12%, you genuinely feel the pain of not saving, and you actually take action. The big takeaway here? Being mathematically right on paper is completely, utterly worthless if the plan is so clinical, or so boring, or so daunting that you just abandon it in real life. Behavioral change is far more important than financial optimization. Whether it's paying off the quote-unquote wrong loan first to get a quick win, or using an overly optimistic growth rate to get yourself off the couch, don't let the quest for perfect math stop you from taking action. Okay, let's pivot to accelerating the finish line. We're talking about financial windfalls. When you suddenly get an unexpected chunk of cash, like a tax refund, an inheritance, maybe a nice work bonus, wealth expert Tess Downing highlights that your mindset matters immensely. Think about how you frame it. If you view the money with a bonus mindset, it feels like extra cash that isn't really yours, and that almost always leads to impulse buying and high-risk spending. Easy come, easy go, right? But if you mentally frame it with a rebate mindset, treating it as your hard-earned money that the universe or the government is finally giving back to you, you become fiercely protective of it. You're far more likely to make a smart choice, save it, or throw it straight at your debt. To actually manage these windfalls, Tess Downing offers a brilliant, highly practical framework: the 40-40-20 rule. Instead of agonizing over perfection, you just split the money. 40% goes immediately to paying down debt and building foundational emergency savings. Another 40% gets invested for your long-term future. And crucially, this is the best part, 20% is reserved for you to just enjoy and spend right now. This mathematically secures your future while psychologically giving you permission to enjoy a totally guilt-free reward, which absolutely prevents budget burnout. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to internalize one simple truth: your mindset is your greatest asset. Getting out of debt is not about perfectly optimizing spreadsheets or punishing yourself with math. It's about acknowledging the heavy physical and emotional burden, lowering your defenses, and building relentless momentum. Psychological momentum beats mathematical perfection every single time. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to empower your journey. Take a look at your finances right now. What is the absolute smallest financial win you can accomplish today to prove to yourself that you can win tomorrow? Maybe it's paying an extra $10 on your smallest credit card. Maybe it's just tracking your spending for one single afternoon. Stop trying to be perfect. Start finding your momentum. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.